Class, it's time for some more work together labs. This module, we're only going to do 2, and I've only got you doing 2 labs on your own because I want to give you time to study before the exam you've got to take as well this week. So let me get my screen shared and we'll go through this first one we're going to be doing. This is XyLab 627. On flipping a coin. So to flip a coin, you either have heads or tails. And what they want us to do is define a method that flips the coin. It says it takes a random object and returns heads or tails according to a random value of 0 or 1. And we can define what the range of our random values by how we seed that call to random that's in the math library. 1 will be head, 0 will be tails. That's our method. Our method takes in a random value. Right down here, they give you the signature for the method. It's public static string coin flip. Public, this is a public method. Static. Static means that it can't be changed by another class, meaning that you can't override its methods. It's static. It does what's programmed. String, this is the type that it returns. It returns a value. If you don't want your method to return a value, that's going to have to be void. But string means that when you run this method, it'll return a string back to the caller, whoever called it. Here's its name, coin flip, and here's its parameter list. It's type random, and it's going to be this thing rand. Random as a type is an object. So you're not feeding it an integer, you're feeding it the object. So this looks a little different than some of the other stuff we've done, but we're getting to the point now where we need to think in objects, and we have classes. When you instantiate a class, it becomes an object. So we're starting to think that way and use objects a little bit more because we're going to get into multi-class programs. So this is the definition of the method. This is what it does. It takes in this object, and then it's going to return a string. Now, the next thing, notice that they tell us this random object is created in the main method using the pseudo-random number generator. Our fixed seed right now is going to be 2, but when submitted, they're going to input other seeds. And you can certainly run this in developer mode with other seeds to see what we're talking about here. The input is how many times you want to flip the coin. So the user is going to tell you how many times to run this loop. If you know how many times to run the loop, you use a for loop. Okay, so for I equals 1, I less than or equal to 3, we're going to run that coin flip. Now, notice what happens when you do this. It just outputs heads, tails, heads. This is the string that's getting returned from coin flip, and it's just printing it out. So inside of your for loop, this is the body of it. It prints out the string that's returned from a call to coin flip. So in the setup of this program, they've given you a bunch of hints on how to structure your code. So when you look at these problems, when you look at any computer program that you're going to write, study the information you know. It will help you structure that solution. And you really need to know what what your program needs to do, the tasks involved, before you can code it. Otherwise, you'll get lost in your code and you'll just thrash and change lines, and you won't know why you're changing them because you don't know what it's supposed to do. So from everything I've got up here, how I want to structure it is I'm going to have a main method. They've already given me a scanner. They've already given me my random object with a seed of 2. I need a variable here for that user input, and it's an integer. So down here, add more variables as needed. I know I need an int for my user input. And then that's the only variable I need. And then what do I want to do with that user input? I need a for loop. And I know I'm using a for loop because I know how many times this loop needs to execute. It's going to be for I equals 0, I less than user input, plus. Okay. Now, if they said until the user inputs yes or no, or until the user inputs a -1, keep reading something in. If you don't know the number of times, if the logic says until something happens, that's your indication that it should use a while loop. But since I know how many times, that's a for loop. And what they told me this for loop needs to do is print out what's returned from a call to coin flip. And there's no other text there. So it's just system.out.print line. Each one of these is a carriage return line feed on a separate line. So I know to use print line. And then what I want is to call coin flip. And I will pass it that random object that they named rand. To make sure this is working okay, you can actually start doing what's called a dummy method. They like to put their methods up above main. Other people will put their methods down below main. This is the main method. It ends with the close brace there, and then this is your class. The only thing we're going to do is your method can't be inside of main, but it must be inside the class. So that's why they ask you to define them up here. You could also define it after your main method. It doesn't matter where the definition is for what we're doing, but they told you to put it up here, so put it up here. They gave you the signature to use. And that signature is the first line of your method. If you run this, I can put a little printout to make sure it's actually running. Since that will return nothing, I'm going to print out a space and I, so that you can see that it actually calls coin flip more than one time. oh, I don't have a return here. This has to return a string, so I have to return something. So inside here, let's give myself a variable that's a string. And let's name it rand result. And then return rand result. And I'll initialize this to the string back here. I'm just telling myself that I entered into this method and I'll return this string so that I know I've been here. User input. What am I missing here? Oh, I didn't do my scanner line. I thought they already had that when they declared the scanner, but they don't. I've got my rand. I need my rand value. User input equals scanner. I'm reading in an int. Okay, so I read in 3. I came down to my for loop. I called coin flip. It should return that string got here, and then I print out I. So I know the loop is running, and I know my function call is working. So when you go to write your own methods, you can do this. Use your signature. If it returns something, an int, a double, a string, set it up so it returns something, and then call it. Make sure you're getting to your method before you actually write code in your method. Now I know my main works exactly like it should, and it's going to print out what it should. Get rid of this now, because I just need to print out whatever happens in coin flip. So at this point, you don't have to do anything to your main anymore. It's set. Now we just need to write this method. And I'm going to have this random result. I'm going to leave that there. And I'm going to return random result. And these lines work fine. What I'm going to get here is I've got some random value here. I've got a rand result. I need to know what that rand is. That's a random object. I need to set it to something, a random number. So, and that random number needs to be an integer. How do I know that? Because up here, they told us it's a random value 1 or 0. So I need the random object to return to me a 0 or a 1. And that's going to be my rand value. How do I get it to give me a random value that's a 0 or a 1? I call the next int from the class random. And I think in your Xi book, it shows you. If you don't know how to use it, though, you can, let me make this, I got my bar up there, so I can't see my tabs. You can always look for random. And even some of these other things will show you how to, Geeks for Geeks is good. Tutorials Point is good. They'll actually show you examples on how to generate random. It's a class, so just like us. System is a class, and scanner is a class, and string is a class. So it has methods you can use. So you can create an object of type random and then call this next int. It's going to generate random integers for you in the range 0 to 999. I need the range 0 to 1, so I can call next int. That method, I can call it with a 2 in there, and I'll get numbers between 0 or 1. You can get integers, you can get doubles. You can't generate a random string. This works for pseudo-random number generation. Okay, so my rand value is going to be rand next int, and I want to generate a random number that's going to be between 0 and 1. So I put a 2 in there because it's not inclusive. So if you put a 3, you'll get a random number between 0 and 2. It doesn't include the one you put in there. Okay, so now rand value is either going to contain a 0 or a 1 if rand value is a 1, then rand result has to be the string heads. Make sure you get the capitals in here. When zyBooks checks for it, it's going to check the case in those quotes. It's a string constant there. So if you have lowercase, it's going to tell you it doesn't match. Okay, so rand result equals heads. I don't need to check if rand value is equal to 0, because if it's not equal to 1, it must be equal to 0, because rand value can only get values of 0 or 1. So I just need an else here. I don't need to check. It's either, if it's not a 1, it's got to be a 0. And then I'll return rand result. Okay, let's give it a test. Heads, tails, heads. Okay, let's submit. There we go. 10 out of 10. Now, see, this one gave it a different seed value of 15. And it's just checking that if it's fed a 1, it gives you heads, so that this will work with a different seed value. It gives you a seed value of 1024. And then gives you 5. So they're checking to make sure you've got it set up with a seed value, and then that you can generate the heads and tails to simulate coin flips. Okay, if you don't understand any of that code, get a hold of me. I'd be happy to go through it. When we're writing methods for most of these, you're going to find that there's usually some task we're going to do. It can be done without using a method. In fact, the next one we're going to do and work together is a problem we had in the last module, the one where it counts word frequencies. Let me get down here. This is exactly the same problem we had in the last module. And remember, in the last module, if you remember the solution code, we needed to have a nested loop in the number of words. We took the first element of the array, and then we compared it to every single element in the array. So it ran from I equals 1 to the length of the array for j equals 1 to the length of the array. If you have a nested loop, that's a good indication that you should write a method. And that j loop, that inner loop, could be replaced with a call to a method. And that's how we're going to solve it this time. Let me pull down the code that we used on that last one. This was our solution in module 5, where we got the words, we put them into array, and then for each element in the array, we compared it to every element in the array, including itself, and counted the number of times it occurs. So this could be a method. I could take each element in the array and call a comparison method, and then just return frequency. And then I would be able to, I don't need to have this nested loop in there. So let's see how they set up this problem for us, because they will give us the inputs the same, the outputs the same as before, but they give us this signature. It's going to have that word list array. It's going to have the size of the list, and this string current word is going to be each element. It's going to be this outer loop from our sequential solution. This right here, this current word. So I'm going to get the current word just like this, and then I'm going to compare it to everyone. Okay, so it'll really make this program much shorter. So some of this code is going to look exactly the same. I'm going to read in my words. I'm still going to load them into an array, but then down here, I'm going to replace all of this with a method. And our code will be much tighter and much more compact with fewer, because I'm going to pull all that out of main and put it in its own method. So let's, like we did last time, this is our signature for the method we need to write. So we can get this in here right away. It's public method, it's static, we're not going to allow it to change. It will return an integer. So it's going to return the frequency, the word frequency. And then there's our main. Let's get our input down here. There's a little caveat on this one. They're asking us to make it even better than it was before. You'll notice that high with the capital H and the mark, and then lowercase. They want us to ignore the case. They want it to be case insensitive when you count the word frequency. And so you'll notice there's a method in the string class that's equals ignore case. So that will allow you to compare the strings and ignore the case. Now you can also take the strings and run it through a loop and lower down case it or upcase the whole thing. Those are methods that are in your string class. But in this case, they said, go ahead and use this equals ignore case. So we still need to read in the length and then each of the words you want to put in that array. So I'm going to pull all of that out of our old program. So I still need a scanner. Here's my stringer user words, size 20. Here's that number of words that I'm going to read in first. Here's the current word as I step through this array of user words. And here's the word frequency. And then just like last time, I need to get the user's words and put them into that user word array. This is right off of this program we wrote last module, because it's the same problem. So this builds my word array. Then at the very end of last module, we did this output. Inside of this loop, we got the word frequency, and then we did this output that outputs everything. That's all going to stay the same in main 2. It prints it out exactly the same. So what I need to do is in the for loop that steps through the user words, I'm going to set the user words at each index to the current word. Then the word frequency will be a call to my get word frequency method. And then I'll print that out, the current word plus the word frequency. So this is the outer loop from our old program. And I don't have an I here, so I need an int there. I equals 0. I less than number of words. The current word is equal to user words I. And that word's frequency is equal to whatever the method get word frequency returns for me. I need to pass it a string array. That's the list of words. That would be our user words. The next thing I need to pass it in that signature is the number, the size of it, which we called num words. And then I need the string for the current word. Okay, so the parameters that are defined up here, they'll tell you what type they have to be. And these have been aliased. You should always alias your parameters when they come into your method so you don't get them mixed up. So these, when you pass them from the calling method, from main, are the actual variables you're giving to the method. And the signature, sorry, my cat is on my keyboard. The signature tells you what order they have to be in and which ones to use. So you couldn't change these. You can't put the length and then the word list and that. Don't do that. You need to do it in the exact order the signature tells you it's in when you call it. And once I get a word frequency, I can print out that current word and its frequency. Okay, so this is much shorter than our old program with the nested loops in it. We're going to take what was in that nested loop and move it up into our method here. In our method, I'm going to set up, I need the frequency is going to be that word count. It's going to, and that's what I'm going to return. That's going to be the frequency. I'm going to call it word count. And when you enter into this method, I'm going to set word count equal to 0. And you can do it on the same line if you want. When you can initialize it when it comes in on the declaration of the variable, or you can just set word count to 0. Either way will work. Okay, now I need to use the names that I call them up here. They're aliases. So for I equals 0 to I less than, call it list size. Okay, and the logic is the same. If the element in the array, word list I, I'm going to use that method they told us we could use, equals ignore case. What string do I want to check if it's equal if I ignore the case? The current word. That's the one that's getting passed in from the loop in main. So if those are equal when you ignore the case, then your word count needs to increase by 1. You'd write it the long way, word count equals you can do word count plus equals. You can do word count plus plus. All of them will add 1 to whatever the word count is. Now, the important thing here is in my signature, it says it returns an int. So within the method, before you close it out, the last thing this thing needs to do is return word count. Okay. Hope I didn't misspell anything. Let's find out. I must have missed a parentheses in that double. Yeah, see, I've got current word is parameter going to equals, ignore case, and then I need to close out my if statement. Oh, I named it words list. Here we go. So I get the same answer they did. Now we're ready to submit. Ten out of 10. So as you're doing these, you can always put that signature in there, give yourself a dummy method, work on main first, and then work on your method. Check it as you go. If you get errors, stop, fix the error before you go on. If you write too much code without testing it, chances are you're going to get lost in your code and have tons and tons of debugging to do. I know I'm a lousy speller and typist, so that's why I frequently run my code to get rid of misspellings, forgotten parentheses, all those little errors I commonly do as I'm writing code, so that it's not a big, huge list of errors when I hit that run in developer mode. And it's hard. The longer the list, the harder it is to debug your code. So test it often and fix all the little errors so that what you're left with is just logic problems at the end. You've gotten rid of all the syntax errors before that. Okay, you've got 2 labs to do. Give those a try. Get the Zybook ones done first before you try that Eclipse one. I always put those Eclipse problems up there. They're ones I make up just to get you used to writing a program that takes user input and outputs to the console in Eclipse. Eclipse is an IDE that you will use for development in your career. I know you'll use it in Java too. So make sure you practice even more than just our module programs. Try to get some of these labs running in Eclipse, because your final is going to be practical. It'll be you and me all alone. I'll give you your problems and I'm going to watch you code. So practice, get confident in your code. You can do it. We've had tons of programs here. I know everybody can learn to code if you practice. Okay, so I will see you. Let me stop my screen share. I'll see you next module. Remember to take your test this week. It'll be open Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And as always, if you have a problem or have a question, get a hold of me. I'm happy to help you. Bye.